My name is Louise Wadley, and I am the director of Hebden Bridge Film Festival, and I am so delighted to welcome Austen and Kirill Mikhanovsky, the director of Give Me Liberty and the writer and producer of the same feature. This is a feature that blew me away when I saw it at the London Film Festival, and I could not understand why that I couldn't get to see it in the UK. So I'm really excited that we have this to present to our audience, and very delighted to welcome you. Welcome, guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We're delighted to be a part of this. And we
We're
too
so
blown away by the fact that it didn't get picked up in England. And so kudos to you, Louise, for being more audacious than all the distributors in England. Audacious and, well, I mean, kudos to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I think what I'd like to do is kind of unpick, I mean, we've had an extraordinary year, haven't we? We're talking to you. Our festival has had to go online. COVID is everywhere. How's the situation for you guys in Milwaukee?
Well, it's, I think it's sort of been mixed. For a period of time, we were the worst in the country. And now the numbers are, I think, among the lowest with the highest vaccination rate. So it hasn't really changed what we do because, everyone's a bit isolated right now and we're just working. It
hasn't changed much anything for us. We didn't make any money before and we continued not making any money for about a year. So it's true, Alison and I worked for 5 years on Give Me Liberty. So it happened for no pay. We were idealistic enough to cut ourselves of the payroll. We were on the cusp of getting a job, I believe, around March or something when this whole thing happened. But what Alice said didn't change much our ethos. We actually began to work harder. And in fact, it was a bit of a blessing in disguise because it finally allowed us to, it locked us in. It's like that apocryphal story about the Rolling Stones who locked themselves I think in the bathroom and didn't come out of it until they had their first album. We, locked ourselves up to finish a script that we started a long time ago.
That's fantastic. So what I want to do is I want to take you guys back. So it was a long time ago. And I think one of the reasons that I responded to this film so strongly was that I felt like it was actually an extraordinarily specific but universal story. And I love the way that it's obviously inclusive filmmaking. It reflects your community and also reflects, I think it was an incredible essay on American life and the gig economy that we're being forced into. We have that very similar situation with obviously our own special components here in the UK. So maybe, Kirill, could you go back and kind of remind us how you came to this story and where it came from?
Well, the proper origin of everything goes really, really, really far back to where our great grandparents met one day, but to give some point of departure, it was a job, one of the many jobs that I had when I was fresh off the boat. In Milwaukee in the 90s, I drove a van, medical transport van for about 9 months. And it was indeed a very important experience, formative experience that I carried with me. And I did want to make a film based on that. And at a certain point, I abandoned the idea because I felt that the reality I was so enchanted by was no more. And fast forward to the time when Alice and I were working on a $45 million sci-fi thriller.
Very practical.
Years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And at the time, Alice tell you more. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about Alice because she's an incredibly accomplished human being, but and equally modest. At the time, she was a star playwright of the Chicago theater scene, working full-time at the Goodman Theater and the Steppenwolf. And at the time, I believe, Alice was adapting Animal Farm for the Steppenwolf, which it had a glorious premiere and run. So right around that time, Alice and I were again, working on that $45 million sci-fi thriller out of Milwaukee. And there came a point when I was particularly antsy because I did not have an animal farm to accomplish, and a director needed to direct. I was fresh out of an experience that didn't pan out, a project I had put 5 years into that collapsed at the last moment. And I began to share these stories of my driving a medical transport van many years before that. And we both were enchanted by the modest but incredibly culturally and socially rich city of Milwaukee. And we shook hands and decided to make a small movie that would allow us to kind of like, we gave ourselves a year and a half to make it. We didn't know how long a journey it would end up being. And the basis for that movie was this van that would be driven across the city, connecting the socially disconnected parts of one of the most segregated cities in the country. The idea was not to make a political film or a social statement. It was to make a deeply humane story about people wanting to get where they needed to be, and by way of this van, inevitably connecting at first, and so on and so forth. And this is that's the genesis, essentially.
So Kirill, like many immigrants coming off, joining society, you just have to get jobs, you have to get work. You get yourself a job. One of the jobs was driving a medical transport van. So you meet all these characters, but that's great. But what's amazing to me is what you must have done, you and Alice together, and Alice as the writer, to bring those stories to the screen.
We actually wrote the script together. I mean, we wrote it together in such a sort of like pulling the computer back and forth way that there was a point at the time we didn't have an office and we were working in cafes. And there was this guy who had observed us, and there was a radio station that's a very well-known station in Milwaukee, and they have a cafe attached to it. And he came up to us and he said, well, what are you guys doing? You're having so much fun. And he said, here they are, these people. And we know this now because he hosted the premiere in Milwaukee, rather. And he said, I was watching these people, and when they said they were writing a script, I thought, right, sure they are. They're having so much fun, and they're going to write a world-class script here in Milwaukee. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that was very important to us, because we talked a lot about precisely the things that you mentioned at the beginning, America, the American dream, whether it's still alive. As Kirill said, Milwaukee is one of the most, if not the most, segregated cities in the country. It's not technically a Rust Belt city. It was like a precision manufacturing city with a lot of small factories. And almost all of them closed when manufacturing sort of went lock, stock, and barrel. No pun. I mean, literally lock, stock, and barrel to China. And consequently, you see these neighborhoods, and you see these, the old factories, and they're not huge factories. They're sort of modest factory buildings surrounded by what once was a vibrant business, little commercial area. And it's completely boarded up now. Like no barber shops, no grocery stores, it's just nothing. So for us, and also Milwaukee is politically split. It was the first socialist city in America many years ago. And there are a lot of sort of people who are very conservative politically. So it seemed an incredible opportunity, and still is ongoing as a microcosm of America, really.
Quickly, again, also to address it from another angle, you understand, for me, again, I'm not, I'm not a social worker or a politician. I'm interested in making motion pictures as a director, writer-director. It's for you as a documentary filmmaker, it's very clear. What you do is you look for your subject matter that touches you, that you do research. So you look at your life, at your childhood, at whatever you know as a research, essentially. So in formal terms, even though it was my life experience of driving that van, it was nothing more than a research. When you take it to, you just know about the subject. And if we didn't know about the subject matter, we would have researched it. And actually, we continued researching by driving around and meeting people and doing community casting and
Well, it's
bringing
how you
people.
found James. You were
Yeah,
riding
yeah.
on the van when you found
We
James.
it was actually we had great fortune, and I think it just, it's the mysticism of it all, which we respect, and by now we understand how it works even better. Actually, we were already in the process of putting the film. We were 2 weeks, literally 3 weeks into the before the cameras would roll. We're 3 weeks out from the shooting of it when I was in the van, just driving around in the shotgun seat when I met James. This was really such a blessing for him. Nothing less than a blessing. But again, it's a research that we continue doing and bringing people's stories into the movie. Again, it's a technique, which almost sounds cold-blooded and cynical, only it is not. The idea is not to make an inclusive film, but to honor people and to honor life, and to bring real people into the frame.
And their experiences.
And inevitably you'll end up having a wide array of lives and stories and ethnic backgrounds, and impossible to find actually, but well, next to impossible, but so that's the approach. But the idea is always to make a motion picture that is exciting, cinematically exciting, and it was just this marriage of a motion picture and the subject matter, and they came together, and they came together. Yeah.
I think
It's funny.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
go, Alice.
One of my favorite actors and producers in Chicago theater has always said, the real question is, okay, I'm interested in that issue, but the real question is it a good movie or is it a good play? Is it something we want to go see as a narrative work that's compelling and fascinating, and in the case of film, cinematic.
I think one of the things I wanted to try and say is that you're absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, it's got to be a good film, and of course the veracity of this film does help, the authenticity, the inclusivity. I don't think I have seen many fiction films that allow those people the space on the screen that you gave them within a dramatic context. So this is why I'm such a champion of the film. I think, it's one thing, as you say, Kirill, do research, documentary, whatever, but actually what I felt like was there was no choice for the viewer but to enter the world that you created, and the frenetic, hectic world of Vic. I mean, I honestly I thought I was going to almost throw up for Vic, because I was so worried for him. And so, like, Vic, if you tell them you're going to be there, and we can see that there's a way that you're not going to make it through that, you just created such tension. You had me, like, the guy next to me at the film festival, his buttocks were clenched. You completely had us with that anxiety of Vic's losing his job, but his kind heart meant that he couldn't possibly cut.
Two things quickly. First of all, you came up with a great rating system that should replace stars, like the way you felt viscerally. Number two, you will not believe, but two critics, American critics, gave it negative reviews precisely describing the experience how you described it, that they were not happy about being anxious. I don't know, they were looking for a sleeping pill, and they walked into a movie. I guess that's what happened. And number three, this is incredible, most incredible, one of the better reviews that we received, not only because it's not just a compliment, or it's not, let's say, compliment. I think what you're describing is just precise. It's just precise and exact. I think, the thing is that this is the veracity, as you describe it, and the tension. The audience has no choice, but it's probably because Ellis and I had no choice but. We had no choice but to make it. And there came a point when we really didn't have a choice but to make it. It was no longer about, hey, should we make this film or another movie? It was basically whether we make this film or and have a shot at
Making another film
more of
someday.
a life, more of a life, which includes, of course, making another film, or not make this film and walk away from ourselves.
Mm.
That was that dramatic.
It
And of
was
course, we couldn't possibly verbalize it as well as we do now. But at the time, it was purely intuitive, primal, and we just had to. Ellis, you were about to say what happened in October of
Well,
2000.
yeah, I mean, we went through a very, very difficult situation where the film had been fully financed at its proper budget, and then the financing fell apart, and we were dropped, and became sort of the like pariahs of, no one would answer the phone, no one would pick up the phone. It was really terrible, and people said, "Oh, you're never going to make this movie," and that was in, I think, really the worst part was November of 2017. Is that right?
October.
Yeah. October. Well, I mean, yeah, and by November, so we fought back, and we ended up through. There were a series of decisions and little battles along the way to figure out how we could possibly do it. And we were in prep at the end of February, and shot the film for a fourth of the original budget, of its proper budget, without sacrificing a single location, a single scene. We brought the actors we were bringing. The Dima came from Russia, and a lot of people in Milwaukee helped us. We had a lot of community support, in fairness, and that was wonderful. From restaurants, from hoteliers, people who really stepped up and
so can I just clarify for people who are not sure, you're talking February in Milwaukee, so we're talking not totally fantastic weather?
No.
Okay, so going back to and addressing the weather. Well, it was of course written for its bleakest,
for winter.
For winter, for its bleakest and for a certain stark, naked feel of it, kind of.
Believe it or not, we wanted more of that than we got.
Yeah, monochromic feel to it, and that's what it was written for. If it was up to me, I would have preferred it to be a little bit earlier, because it would have been a little bit more miserable, and just because the cold is such a part of this place. It has a summer. It has a proper summer, which is very hot and humid for about 4 months or 5 months. I would say really warm weather. But I think the character of the city comes through really truly in winter, and it was quite a. It was not a winter of our discontent. It was actually the summer of our discontent.
The fall.
Yeah. But it was proper winter. And we wanted, but we couldn't do it early, obviously, because the thing is, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Before we talk about the kind people of Milwaukee, I'm going to say that nobody wanted to make it in Milwaukee. Nobody wanted to make this film anywhere. There were indeed a few kind people in Milwaukee, a number of kind people all over the world. There are kind people, and the film is about kind people. But the reality was that when we were dropped,
it was the two of us.
High and dry, it's just the two of us, and no one was going to help. I'm sorry, no one was going to help. So it was basically people were standing by and watching. Are they down? 1, 2, 3, and I believe on 5. We did not have a choice. We became the pariahs, just like Ellis said, from the hottest toast of town, from getting letters from England. We got from lovely British actors, young actors. The script just got around from agency to agency all over the world. We got picked up by one of the hottest distributors, producers in the world today. We're not going to name them, but with proper research, anyone curious will find out. And we were dropped dead, and we were dropped, and nobody wanted to talk to us. And all of a sudden we became this pariahs that nobody wanted to be associated with. We were on our own proper. And I remember the moment, I remember the day, I remember actually that very day. We didn't take days, a week to understand what's going on. We faced each other. And we were standing next to a window in that old office that we had. And in fairness, the only two people who were with us were the owners of that office building, Jim and Catherine Donnelly.
Yeah.
The Donnellys were with us for 5 or 6 years, and they basically gave us that office space for free for a very long time. It was their made a major contribution to the film, in fairness. And of course, our families, stood by us, through thick and thin. But at that time, we looked at each other and basically we understood we need to make it. Hell or high water, we need to make it with whatever few shillings and pennies we have in our pocket. We need to basically just go at it. And I believe within a few days, we had the first $100,000. And then, I mean, we just picked up the phone and called everyone we could and reached out, far and beyond. We have to make it. And
Can I just check? So guys, can I just check? So you actually had to like go, okay, we've lost everything, we've been dropped. Did you crowdfund? How did you make it happen?
We brought in a few different people and really just scrambled to raise money enough to shoot, just enough to shoot. I mean, it wasn't that much more than 100 minutes, and it was, I mean, we were raising money as we shot, which I would never recommend doing. It's a terrible thing to do, because there's that constant anxiety. Well, but I think once we got going, we understood we were going to do it. And there were a number of people who'd been on hold for a long time. The actor who plays Dima, Lolo, a wonderful Lauren Spencer who plays Tracy. She was just cast in an HBO Max show, which is so exciting. She's a member of their ensemble. And we had been in touch with them and they had been on hold for a long time. So I think there was this collective energy that really catalyzed once we started shooting. But there was a point before that happened where we couldn't find Chris Galust. Lolo said she couldn't do it, but we had like just a series. What, Kirill? You're like
to put it in a narrative perspective, what we understood was very, very simple. That after so many stop and goes, and we've had about 3 false starts, and after banging on that door for that long of a time, we understood that either it happens this winter or it doesn't happen.
Or it wasn't. Yeah.
And now, and with those people on hold, basically people started losing their, faith in the project. And because of our Russian elderly contingent, we also, understood that, time lives forever. So, we're dealing with delicate subject matter here on all sides. People's time, people's lives, people's health. We needed to do it either now or never. And again, all of that, and the fact that we were drop dead, and because we were left hanging there, high and dry there, because of the subject matter that we're about to lose, this reality, all of that was contributing to our ferocity, to our this fury, this vehemence with which we tackled the issue. Because basically it spurred us in the most brutal possible way, but that's perhaps exactly what we needed. And what Alice is saying is that no one can plan for that sort of thing. You can't plan for that sort of thing.
No, I mean,
it's a wonderful way of spurring you into action and forcing you to do that. You run for your life.
I think if you go through something like that, it's great if you can get through it. Because it's an experience I would never want to repeat.
But Alice, but not going through this was not an option.
No, it's not an option. And I think, when I think the turning point was actually, because we didn't have money, we had everyone, we knew we could do it. We came up with this crazy scheme at one point. Remember that, to shoot the whole movie in real time. To rehearse and shoot in real time, which would have been a nightmare and really impossible. But I think people heard about that and they thought, oh my God, they're going to make it come hell or high water. Like, they're going to make this movie. And I think that there was when we just became so like, well, we're making it. That's it.
And I think, one of the things I was going to ask you guys, so, just there's so many things I'd like to talk about this film. The casting, like Lolo, Lauren Spencer, she just navigates. She's such a beautiful counterbalance to Chris, who's making me really worried that he's going to get sacked and he's not going to make it. And then all the other characters that we meet either through him or through Dima or whoever. I filmed in Russia, and I've been to Russia about 3 or 4 times. So I loved the element, the grandfather and Dima and everyone like that. But I wonder if you could tell us, Chris Galust, is that his name? Beautiful, beautiful performance. Lauren Spencer, tell me a little bit about those people and how you found them and working with them.
Well, Lolo came through, we wrote the characters and then thought, oh my God, we've written ourselves into a horrible corner. Where are we going to find people who can play these roles? Chris's role less so, but certainly the role of Tracy. And the Goodman Theater in Chicago had done a very inclusive play, and I reached out. They have a brilliant casting director, and I reached out to her, and she got us to someone in New York who got us to someone in LA who got us to Lolo's agent. And so Lolo was the first person we talked to, and shockingly, she was Tracy. It was so clear that there was like never a question. And then Chris was the Victor story was a very long and complicated story. We were at first determined to cast non-actors, and then we were just having trouble finding exactly the right person, and then sort of acquiesced to the idea of casting a name actor, and went through a very difficult. We looked at, I'd say, 200 people. I mean, we were looking at videos. We actually had Skypes with almost every lovely young guy. Most of them were British or from the UK. It was an ordeal.
That was a mistake on my part. It's not the first time actually, but the idea was I had very good experience working with non-actors on my first film. And obviously this is not I didn't invent this technique, but, and so before we wrote a single line of the script, I knew the film had to be with non-actors, and and we and Alice got on board with that idea, even though Alice had experience with mostly actors or only actors in theater, etc.
Yeah, it's hard to use non-actors on stage.
But I mean, it's not something we all celebrated all the time. We would celebrate it all the time because it actually made it more difficult in certain regard, of course. But at any rate, once we were on board with it, we never considered any other way. But again, we had certain the so-called ill-fated partners at the time in New York when they proposed, why don't we look at someone because he's in every frame, et cetera, et cetera. And I was one of the people who said, yeah, why not? Maybe find somebody raw, fresh, but sort of like a non-actor. And before we knew it, we were basically talking with every cast member of Dunkirk.
Yeah, I mean, it was comedy.
Yeah,
lovely
yeah.
guys,
And,
by the way. Absolutely
every
lovely
member.
guys we'd love to work with someday.
Et cetera. Yeah. They're all lovely, et cetera.
It was a very
actually one of the people was, you're not going to believe it, Josh O'Connor. I mean, we basically, Josh O'Connor was.
Well, at one point we cast him. He was cast.
Yeah, we cast him, but something didn't work out. Some logistic didn't work out. But we cast Josh O'Connor. We said, okay, let's go with Josh O'Connor. We've been at it for 6 months. Obviously those guys are anxious to do that, and something didn't work out.
So that was the end. That was the end of the process, and that was when we were running out of time.
Yeah.
And the ill-fitting partners were not getting contracts and not getting things we needed for the big, well-known production distribution group. And we were under all this pressure, and they brought on the distribution group, rightly and wonderfully recommended Jen Venditti, who's a brilliant casting director, who cast Uncut Gems, American Honey. She's wonderful. And she does brilliant street casting as well as non-street casting. And she sent scouts out, and she was under this insane pressure to find someone. And I think it was like the last possible day, her scout was in Brighton Beach and saw Chris and thought, wow, that kid looks great. But, you know, and she heard him speak English, and she's like, okay, he speaks English, but what are the odds that he speaks Russian? So he was going into a bakery to buy a cake for the 25th anniversary of his grandfather emigrating to America from the former Soviet Union. He lived with his grandfather, and he ordered the cake in Russian, and they were like, you know, there we go, we got him. It was, you know, and that was, and he's a natural. He's very gifted, very lovely guy who really took care of people during the shoot. He actually drove Lolo everywhere. In fact, when we were at Sundance, we rented a van, and Chris drove Lolo. It was just, you know, he was the driver. And that's
a fantastic story. I wanted to fast forward a little bit, because you went through this extraordinary process, which only makes the film more valuable, actually. All the things and the trials and vicissitudes and tribulations. But one of the things I was going to say to you, so then we're talking about a film that you went to Sundance, and did that help you into the next stage? Like you'd kind of done a rough cut or got to a certain place?
Well, it was complicated because Kim Yutani was such an incredible advocate for the film and loved it, and it mattered enormously, and it was a great privilege to be there. We were in a position, we were doing pickups, substantial pickups in November, and found out in the middle of pickups that we were in Sundance. So our post was just madly compressed. And we, after Sundance, went back and finished our post-production. So we were not picked up by a US distributor out of Sundance, which was very difficult. You know, that was really hard. Wild Bunch had seen the film in France when we were doing post-production, and they loved it and they picked it up. So it was almost like a backwards experience for an American film. We had international distribution with Wild Bunch, and we didn't have US distribution.
But you went from Sundance to then you were in Cannes, yeah?
I did have enough time to finish the editing of the film. And frankly, in fairness, the last cut was done on the day when the last day of mix. I did not have the distance from the material at all. The first time I thought it was perfect when we watched it with Wild Bunch on January the 8th, I believe, January the 8th or the 7th, and then January the 20th, the 24th of January. We were the first screening of our section, which was very lovely, which was really. We were kind of we were the talk of the town at Sundance. We were the revelation of the festival, and everyone who was anything went to the screening of the film. And
why do you think it spoke? Why do you think it spoke to people so much? Kirill.
Obviously not to distributors, and not immediately. But I don't know why. Well, I mean, honestly, that's not the question for me. For me, the question is, why doesn't it speak to some people? That's the question I have. So it's very obvious. It has unique energy. It's, in my opinion, it's the best movie of 2019. And has incredible cinematic sweep to it. In terms of energy, films like this come once in a lifetime, in my opinion. And it's easy for me to say because it has to a certain extent to do something with me and Alice, but it's really is this energy of the moment and of certain time and of certain conditions, because it became so much more than just a motion picture to us, because you can't plan this kind of event, frankly. We did plan a motion picture with the script and other things. You can plan certain things, but then life bursts in a way that you never plan it, and all that. I mean, could it be worse? Of course it could, but it was pretty bad, let me tell you that. And so this complete constant adversity, constant fight, constant struggle, constant run for survival. And of course, all of that, metaphysically speaking, contributed in the most incredible way. So it does, we've seen people weep for hours after the movie, be affected by it in the most profound way. I think that anyone who has a soul reacts to it viscerally, but anyone who has a very hard shell around their soul, it will be bouncing back. Some people actually are afraid of facing the movie. I think they're so, they feel uncomfortable because it touches upon something that they don't feel comfortable revealing that in themselves, within themselves. And that's why they bounce it back. The reason it didn't pick up commercially in England, for instance, for two reasons, or in many other places, because there are no stars and because there was no money behind it. And there was no money behind it.
Do you know, Kirill, I think what you're saying is interesting, but I've thought about this quite a lot, and I think it also possibly is because we had a film called I, Daniel Blake, which you may have heard of, by Ken Loach,
Yeah, yeah.
which you know what it's like with distributors and with with exhibitors and stuff. You can only have one film about one thing at one time in the world. So, oh yeah, you already did that film about the people who are on the margins, kind of thing. But what I think is different for me, as certainly as a non-American watching it, is you somehow encapsulated something so universal, but at the same time unique, and that you had a collection of people on the screen where I loved I, Daniel Blake, and I think it was a really great film. But in your film, we are meeting people who are living in all sorts of circumstances, really difficult circumstances. And yet there's, I mean, Alice, I don't know if you wrote this in, but there's so much funny stuff in there. I just burst out laughing half the time.
Well, we we had a lot of fun making, writing the script, and we had, despite all the struggle and difficulty, there were a lot of tremendously fun moments making the film. I mean, looking back, there were moments of absolute hilarity in the process, and I think, for both of us, we both see the tragedy and comedy of life very closely. They're together always. And I remember there was a point where we were both telling each other stories of very funny things that happened at funerals of close family members. And, how the whole group of the family burst, was laughing and trying not to laugh in this incredibly sober circumstance. So I think the comedy arises very organically out of it. And it's been complicated for us because it was pitched in the States as a comedy. And when, in fact, indeed, when we first had the meeting with, this one group we were working with for a time, we were in the room and they said, well, we just loved your brilliant comedy. And we had thought of it as a dramatic script, not a comedy. I think there are moments of great comedy. I think you're absolutely right. But I think sometimes people in the States, they stream it on Amazon thinking, oh, it's going to be a laugh riot comedy. And then they're like, well, this isn't, whatever, Seth Rogen style comedy. It's very different. So
there's a bit of a difference between obviously funny and comedy. Again, like put it in the Procrustes bed of comedy. People have certain expectations. It's like to call life comedy, is a shortchanging it, obviously, because life is a comedy, but it's also a tragedy, and tragic comedy being the best probably of genre to work with and to category to describe life with. Universal, the only way to make things universal is to make things specific. So the fact that it's specific and universal, that's
Kirill, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the intersection, the intersection of universality and specificness is where we make good art. And I think that's what you've done.
It can be. I think when one works on something, you can try to make it universal because you'll end up making it generic, and it's going to be just research well and do it precisely and accurately, and if you're lucky enough to capture our humanity, it'll end up being universal, obviously, and relatable, highly relatable. As far as the comedy of things, again, the best way and the only possible way of dealing with tragedy and drama is through comedy. And this is something that Britain knows really well, in fairness, historically. Today,
I don't know. I think the Russians have got quite a good sense of humor. I used to love it when I was there, and they'd say, the first 500 years are the hardest. If I was complaining, I'm an Australian. I'm there. It's -20. I'm not coping with the weather. It's we were, and they were like, oh, you poor thing. Never mind. It's the first 500 years, and I love that dry wit. It was great.
There is that. Thank you. Well, it's a blessing that you appreciate it, because some people find Russian humor weird, but there are certain differences. There are certain differences, but that's the beauty of the situations in which we found ourselves. Because again, the van didn't have proper heating, and the only way to really heat it up was to pack it with as many people as possible. But then you get the windows fogged out, but then you get really beautiful shots with the lights fogged out. And then the fumes, there was some filters stolen from the van that
from the back, from the tailpipe.
Us for 2 months to use for free, really. But there were certain filters, so within minutes it would get filled up with the diesel fumes, and you would feel the sand in your mouth. So all of that was contributing again to the process, because it was not a day on the beach, with a nice martini. It was really we were in the trenches, and we were filming the trenches. So the actual how it was made was contributed to what you ended up seeing on the screen, and the ferocity and the agony of what you see there, and the comedy and the drama. It was in a certain way, it was a weird sort of documentary of how we were making it. And so, universal comedy, all well noted. Thank you.
Kirill and Alice, I would love to talk to you much longer, but I want to just say congratulations again. I know it's been a while, but congratulations. I really believe this will stick around, this film, and I'm so pleased to bring it to audiences. And if you could just, I don't know if you can share anything about your plans or what's on the horizon for you guys next. That'd be lovely.
Yes. So we are currently working on a film with a studio, actually, that will be shooting in Milwaukee and Wisconsin. And we're developing a series. And the film that we first started working together on before we wrote Give Me Liberty, we circled back to in October of 2019. Yes. And no, 2020, but no, 2019, my God, it's just amazing. And we expected it not to be particularly interesting or compelling, and in fact found it to be really interesting. We took it for a spin, and then the pandemic hit, and we took it for another spin because it is a futuristic world, and the subject matter turned out to be very timely for a number of reasons. And that script is complete, and we're going to shoot that film I'd say in the next year or so, which is exciting.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Kirill, so you've been through such a lot together. What a strong team you must be. Still talking to each other still?
Still laughing, yes. Still killing each other every day. Yeah, point blank. But and picking it all up, and where we leave it off, and moving forward.
Fantastic.
It didn't kill us; it made us stronger, for sure.
Fantastic. Look, I just want to finish up by saying thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and it's wonderful, despite the fact that we're all being held hostage, living in this very strange time of COVID, to be able to show your film, and I'm delighted to introduce audiences to it. So thank you very much.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
An honor.
Together, and we're so blessed with you. And no matter what we think of how highly we may be regarding the work, we're truly blessed with someone like you and a great number of people around the globe who really connect with the film and champion it. And thank you so much for doing this, and so blessed with you and your audience.
It's a
Thank you
pleasure.
so much.